Parents of Reddit, when did you realize it wasn't just teenage hormones? Your kid is a legitimate asshole? My dad makes a good living that allows my mom to be a stay-at-home mom. As a stay-at-home mom, my mom's only real job is to be the maternal figure of the house. Needless to say, she goes all out well. In elementary school, my mom would pack me and my brother extravagant bag lunches, amazing sandwiches with all the cookies and chips any middle schooler would love. One day, my mom started to notice that my little brother was coming home super hungry after school and that he had eaten all his lunch, yet he still was dying hunger every day at 3 o'clock. When he would walk through the door, my mom asked him why he was so hungry, and she suspected that he was getting bullied and his food was getting taken by some of the older kids at school. He's pretty small. Well, since he didn't say anything, my mom called his teacher and had her look out for her. My mom got a startling call not more than a week after her inquiry. My younger brother was gathering the fat, poor, hungry kids who didn't have money or were still hungry for food and was putting on a hunger talent show. He would make the fat kids dance for his food and the poor kids do weird jackass-like stunts for it. When my mom heard, she was devastated. She had spawned an asshole. Years later, he is a successful lawyer with a beautiful family, but still a faking asshole. My mum's just figured this out with my little brother. He's 18 and just moved to uni. Me and him haven't gotten along for a long time. My mum has defended him for years, claiming he's just fiercely independent and enjoys his privacy. But I've considered the behavior as Harley for a long time. If you ask about how he is, he flips out because it's not your business. If you have a conversation and he disagrees with something, he will not respond to any evidence that supports you and will belittle and patronize. Yeah, sure it is. Oh yeah, right. But that's just how he is. He has zero empathy. If something is going wrong in someone's life, he becomes Mr. Hindsight, absolutely emotionless and again, condescending and belittling. There is no such thing as opinion or gray areas in his world. If he has seen someone's life go to shit through marijuana use, all marijuana use is terrible and the medical marijuana idea is bullshit. If he likes a band, they are good. And if you disagree, not only are you wrong, but you are little piece of shit. He's found on his carpet. But he just can't communicate very well. He doesn't really mean what he's saying. Try and listen better. So he went to uni, hasn't called my mum, except to ask for help moving from one room to another. She is obviously worried. He's the baby and now her and dad have an empty nest and she misses him. So she texts and emails at most once a day just asking how are you rather than calls. She doesn't want to disturb him. She doesn't get replies usually. But then she got this horrible email back: stop trying to invade my life. You're not involved anymore. It's none of your business. Just leave me alone. I think she's realized that it may be just how he is. But how he is an asshole. She's still trying to defend him a little. But when I talk to her, it's easy to hear the hurt in her voice. She has always been there for this little TW. Much to my annoyance, as she always sided with him in arguments. I know he's yelled at you for the last 30 minutes, but you did ask him how school was. But hearing her this upset is awful. I think she always hoped that once he got more independence he'd relax down a bit. He always felt trapped in our hometown, but it's gone the other way. I honestly don't think he has any intention of being part of the family again. He's previously told me that if I or he ever have kids, they are probably not going to meet each other, and that looking after my parents is probably going to be my responsibility. I don't overly mind, but I know it's going to kill my mum. I would pull him from school and enroll him in a program for children with emotional and behavioral problems. Insurance covers it often, and it is worth missing traditional school. Now is the time to try everything before he becomes aggressive and fully grown. Positive praise goes really far, must be used more often than what you think is normal, few times an hour or as much as possible. Praise things you want him to do in the future. Can be anything as simple as I like how you asked me in a quiet voice. That was nice of you. At age 12 his behavior can be altered. Every year that passes his behavior will solidify. If he has little to zero friends, that is a huge red flag. Does this boy play video games like it is a full-time job? If so, limit it to no more than 3 hours a day and use it as a reward. You can play video games. If you wash the dishes, maybe he has a thing against dishes. Ask him to choose a chore. It may be one that you hate, like washing windows or taking out the trash. reward. Positives are stronger than negative attention and punishment. I could go on about this topic for ages. If you post more info edited for grammar. I 100% agree with you, but also disagree. Society has realized that teenagers are the ultimate consumers, so this has led to the idolization of teens in Western culture in order to get them to continue consuming, and it works. Teens live every day by going to school and seeing that, no matter what it is they are good at, there is always someone who is better. They then go home where they are falsely worshipped by some corporation who wants their parents' money, and they give in, because it's one of the few things that make them feel good about themselves, along with alcohol and drugs, which is why most teens do that, too. With some teens, the false worship from society gets to their head, and they become pricks, because after feeling so revered they actually start to believe that they are hot shit. In reality, which they have detached from, they are just as useless as every other consumer. It is with this newfound knowledge of how utterly useless a teen is to society that they start to search for something to make them feel good. When they find this idolization, they follow it and start to believe it, because that is the only thing that motivates them to do anything without feeling like a sack of shit. It is not the teen's fault they're an ass, and this is not the case for even close to every teen. As a society, we need to stop false idolizing these teens and also give them more freedoms so they can actually feel like a useful part of society. Change the goddamn drinking age. It's only making them feel less attached to society. Give teens more trust and stop trying to shove shit down their throats. Unfortunately, none of these things will happen, because in giving teens more trust they will stop buying shit they don't need. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth on it. This is all 100% opinion based, and I'm sure a lot of people disagree, but that's why it's called an opinion. When my mom called me asking if I could track down my sister's baby because she'd abandoned it. My sister has 5 kids, 2 were with their father, but she had the other 3. My mom got a call from the twins' babysitter saying she hadn't heard from my sister in a few days and was wondering when my sister would be coming to pick her kids up. My mom called around and no one could find my sister or the baby. So, she went to pick up the twins, and their babysitter suggested that the baby might be with a woman whose name she could only partially remember, but who she'd heard was babysitting the baby from time to time. So, my mom called me frantically asking if I could use the magic of the internet to track this lady down. I used online yellow pages, Facebook connections, and just cold calling a lot of people asking, "Do you have a baby?" I finally got a hold of the right person, who said I was just about to call the cops. I thought I was going to be babysitting for a few hours, and it's been 2 days. My mom went and picked him up, and my sister hadn't even dropped off any clothes with him. TLDR, my sister basically just said this is too much pressure for me, arranged for babysitters for the 3 kids, and the left town. My mother was convinced, at that moment, that she'd raised a sociopath. Edit. Since everyone asked the same questions, my mom forced her to have her tubes tied. My mom won custody of the baby, and the babysitter of the twins became their foster parents, and will probably, ultimately, adopt them. My sister got remarried, and joined the army. We're all just waiting for her to either get kicked out, start cheating on the new guy, or whatever. My parents recently told me they knew I was an asshole based off of my mannerisms towards others, and my behavior in particular circumstances. They knew I would go out of my way to fuck with someone, especially if they did something I didn't like, even it wasn't wrong. They knew I was a bully to kids on my bus growing up, and knew I would pick fights with my baseball coaches and teammates at games, because I knew the game better than them, and I knew that I knew the game better. I was better than them at it in every sense, and I was superior, and my knowing of that led me to become an asshole. They knew I'd take the car all over the place in order to go see multiple girls. They found out I said I love you to multiple girls to get what I wanted. They told me it killed them when they found out that my asshole behavior led me to losing my first love. They raised me better than that, and they hated to see I wasn't listening and losing something important to me, especially since I was unwilling to change. They acknowledged the fact that when some of my better friends stopped coming around, that it was probably because I used them as a stepping stone to advance myself in society, and at college I used some people to help get a grade point. They told me all of this when they saw me change from that person when I met the most influential woman in my life. They saw that she didn't like the asshole me and saw that I was changing so I could have her in my life. They saw me become more compassionate, more helpful, and more respectful in every aspect of my life. They admitted this to me when I lost her, and yet continued to work out my flaws and shortcomings that I developed from being an asshole, so I can ensure that her and I make it point TLDR. My parents told me they knew I was an asshole based off of how I acted towards everything, and that it wasn't just hormones and puberty, because when I lost my first love, I didn't care to change, but in my most recent and successful relationship, I changed to ensure the woman would be in my future, and that I'm continuing to change to ensure she'll stay there. My parents realized too late that my sister is a supreme bitch. I recognized it from the time she was 11. Puberty hit her hard, and she had older friends who were a bad influence. She's also very pretty and petite, so that didn't help matters. It was a gradual change, but they were blind to it. I told them countless times, she's horribly manipulative and completely disinterested in even the most menial of work. She doesn't do chores, her room is worse than most male dorms I've seen, she smokes pot inside the house, and she failed high school twice now. She's 17 and dating a 26-year-old roofer with 2 kids. Her life is nothing but a downward spiral of open hate and contempt for her entire family, not to mention suicide attempts and complete refusal for professional help. My mom makes excuses for her like learning disabilities and depression. I know what learning disabilities are, because I was one of the few boys in the 90s and early 2000s who was rightfully diagnosed with ADHD, and I struggled, but I overcame it. I've had friends who were legitimately clinically depressed, and she's definitely not. She's lazy, ungrateful, and a complete as because my parents never disciplined her, let her get away with everything, and were completely blind to her behavior. They gave her everything she wanted because they didn't know how to deal with her behavior, just to shut her up. Unless she does a reality check really faking quick, she probably won't survive the next few years and will end up dead somewhere. She has no hope for any kind of post-secondary schooling and has no artistic or trade skills whatsoever. All she does is smoke pot and hang out with rednecks and really bad people all day. Not to mention that, while I've been off in another province studying miles off in university, I left my valuable stuff at home for safekeeping until I get my own place. She stole a prized possession from me and gave it to her then boyfriend about 2 years ago. It's faking gone forever now, and despite my outrage, my parents think, oh relax, it was only a toy, you're too old for that stuff now. My things aren't safe even in my own house, but I can't do anything because I'm stuck here 1,000 miles away in school. I've ranted too long, sorry. I think my son might be an asshole. He came home from school with a note in his book bag. He's 8, that said I hope you freaking die tomorrow. When I asked him about it, he told me his classmate passed it to him during the previous day. I uploaded a photo of the note and emailed it to the principal and his teacher asking them to get to the bottom of this situation. I asked my son again about the circumstances of the note. This was serious stuff, kids get suspended and written up for this. He kept saying this kid wasn't his friend. He didn't respond to the note, and it made him feel bad and sad. I told him what the consequences were for the classmate who wrote it. My son understood all of it. Friday morning the principal of the school called Y kid in her office to get his side of the story. She told him to tell the truth, just the facts. That's when he finally admitting to being the one to speaking the words. The other child wrote them down, and they were goofing off. He was willing to let another child be suspended and branded a bully for what? Sympathy? Attention? To avoid blame for hurtful words. Punishment. Each party is to receive a handwritten apology from him delivered in person on Monday morning. He lost all television privileges and his brand new Kindle with the Pocket Minecraft app has gone bye-bye. He is on indefinite chore duty without allowance. I feel like I definitely did something wrong for my kid to lie and be willing to let his friend and classmate suffer serious consequences over a story he made up in his head. I'm very fortunate in that none of my kids are assholes. They have their quirks, as everyone does, but I can honestly say that I'm far more of an asshole than any of them are. Point a little family history is in order here. Bear with me. Point I have 3 older sisters. The oldest used to be a true flaming beach until she had breast cancer, which knocked her around enough to really make her rethink her perspectives. The middle one is actually not too bad, though she has some pretty unpleasant traits as well. The youngest of the 3 is a serious asshole, the sort of person you want to punch when you get to really know her. Superficially charming, but under the surface, asshole, through and through. Point my dad was an asshole, though in his 80s he's finally mellowed a bit. Mom was not much better. It was not a happy childhood, to say the least. I was 18 before I really realized just how much of an asshole I was, and after that realization hit I started doing my best to change myself. As my kids grew up, the boys both exhibited pretty horrid behavior that on occasion really worried me, and I called them on it. But I also gave them some advice here and there that they seem to have taken to heart, and now they both realize why I was so hard on them for some of what they did and feel pretty embarrassed about it. After all, who doesn't feel that way? But we've talked though that over the past few years and put some of those old ghosts to rest as they realize that I'm not going to ever sit that with them, and now they're doing pretty damn well. A shout out to someone who gave some advice that I printed out and handed to them when they were about 14 and 15 respectively. Dan Savage, of Savage Love fame. It was the first letter in this article. Both of them apparently acted on it, thank God. I will take some credit for their turning out well, though their innate natures have a stronger sway than anything else does. But I made very strong efforts to break the asshole streak in my family through conscious control of my behavior and constant monitoring. My sisters didn't, and the children of the younger 2 are in fact assholes through to the bone. TLDR, my kids are not assholes like me or the rest of my family, because I wouldn't let them be. I feel bad for my mom, because I've come to realize in the past few months that I think my sister is actually a sociopath. My mom divorced my sister's dad, we're half sisters, when he went crazy after cracking his head open on a granite rock about 7 years ago, and my sister rarely sees her dad, except when it benefits her, such as getting away from my mom's rules, getting money from him, etc. She was just diagnosed with depression and she's gotten better since she's been on medication. But anytime you accuse her of lying, she'll scream and berate you and make you feel like absolute shit until you have physical evidence that she was lying. When you do get this evidence, she will then start to cry and say that it's all because my mom has always favored me over her. She gets upset that my mom treats us differently. I'm 21, she's 15. In reality, my mom has always been way stricter on me, and I believe that she doesn't always do everything she can do to stop my sister's bad behavior. Some examples, not in any specific order. Sorry for the long wall of text. She had a party at my house when my mom was out of town, had over $300 worth of goods stolen/broken, and somehow got my mom to believe that random kids from her school found out about her being out of town and just started throwing this party. She never had any punishment. She stole my mom's boyfriend's gun, he lives with us, and screamed and cried when we wouldn't believe her, called my mom the most horrible names, moved in with her dad during this time, and eventually her friend told me that she did steal the gun, and when my mom found it, she blamed it on her depression, saying she wanted to kill herself because she has such an awful life here with us. Her friends have stolen alcohol and prescription pills from my mom, her boyfriend, and me. My blamed me at first, given my age, and my sister tried to blame it on me. When I told my mom about my pills being stolen, and that it was probably my sister/her friends who stole it, I was out of town when this was all going down. My sister started freaking out on me for telling on her, saying I was such a horrible sister to her. My sister about 2 months ago left the house with her friend, saying she was going to go talk things out with her ex-boyfriend at 10 p.m. at night on a Tuesday, school night. I knew there was nothing I could do to stop her, so I just let her go. About 2 hours later, her and her friend still aren't back, so I get a hold of her friend, and she said that my sister had alcohol poisoning, and that they were on their way back to my house. When they get to my house, my sister is regaining consciousness, had puke all over herself, and is pretty much dead weight. Her friend and I get her into the house, and I wake up my mom. My mom bans her from going to homecoming, and makes her go to school the next day. My sister tries to blame me for her not being able to go to homecoming, because I told on her, and she gets pissed off at my mom, tells more lies to her dad and moves in with him again. I find out from one of her friends that she spent that whole weekend drunk, high on weed, rollin', on molly, and taking something called triple C, which is cough and cold medicine. I tell my mom, she tells my sister's dad, and somehow my sister gets away with it all again by pairing my mom and her dad against each other. Finally, last Saturday I was coming home from work at 2:30 am. I work at a bar, and I see my mom's boyfriend's car pulling out of the driveway and a gas can laying in the driveway. I jump out of my car and run to where my mom and her boyfriend are, wake them up, as my sister is running and yelling at me to stop and not wake them up. The police are called. After all of these incidents, they know her at this point, because we live in a small town, and she lies to all of our faces, and screaming/crying saying we are blaming her, because she's the one everyone hates in the house. The car was returned like 15 minutes later. The next day I finally get the truth out of my sister's boyfriend, and again she blames everyone else but herself, even though she gave her friends permission to take the car, because they needed a way to get to a gas station to fill up a gas can. I'm not really sure what exactly changed her, but these incidents have all occurred from late August until now. When she was 13 she would get all mad and upset when I would legally smoke hookah or drink with some friends at my house when I was 19, and now she's doing crazy stuff that I would never do, and every time she gets caught, she somehow finds a way to make herself the victim, and she really and truly believes that she is the victim. My mom wants to blame it all on her depression, but I think it's way more than that. TLDR, I think my 15-year-old sister is a sociopath. My cousin is 8 years old, and she's been an asshole since she was 4. She's probably the meanest little girl on the face of the earth. She calls family members ugly or other hurtful names. She's incredibly spiteful to be so young, and her parents let her get away with anything. She's in advanced classes at school, so she knows what she's doing too. Here's a prime example. A couple of months ago my parents' cat had a litter of kittens. My cousin was notorious for being mean to animals because she could, according to her. For that reason, my mother didn't want her anywhere near the kittens and would make an exception only if an adult was with her. One day my mother was forced to babysit her, and the entire day she kept trying to sneak outside to play with the kittens. My mom had to get dinner started, so she told my cousin to watch TV and stay in the house. With her back turned for 2 minutes, my cousin slipped outside. My sister, who was also at the house, just happened to step outside a few minutes after she did. When she walked out, she found the mother of the kittens was locked up in the cat carrier on the porch, and she walked out just in time to watch my cousin throw one of the newborn kittens against the side of the house. My sister ran and grabbed her and asked her why she would do that. She told her right to her face, because I can. TLDR. My 8-year-old cousin is the spawn of Satan. Legitimate asshole here. I can tell you exactly when my mother realized. Took her a while, as my teenage years were pretty checkered. Drugs, alcohol, the rest. She invited me to lunch, as she often did, and for some reason this time I accepted. Once we got our meal and got through all of the small talk bullshit, she started in with the "I never hear from us" and the "we never talk s." I made all the usual excuses, but then she looked me in the eye and asked if I didn't call, if I didn't write, if I didn't make the effort, would you? Would I ever hear from you? And I looked her in the eye, and instead of placating her like I usually did, I told her very honestly and sincerely, no. She got really quiet for a bit, and then looked at me with a face full of tears and grief, and asked me why I was this way. What had happened to her sweet boy? Who was I? I could ask you the same question. You were there. You helped. For all of it. You and my father have always been my two biggest influences. At what point do you divorce yourself from responsibility for who I am? Was it when I got caught doing meth and you threw me out? Was it when you were having an affair and shipped me off to live with my uncle on the other side of the country? Was it when I was being bullied and all you could do was roll away from me on the couch? Do you think this just happened? That I woke up one morning and found it difficult to care about anyone or anything? This took years and a lot of help. If you want to know who I'm today, all you have to do is look back on who you were, or something to that effect. Anyway, she called me an asshole and ran out. That was 3 years ago, and I haven't spoke with her since. Not a parent, but a brother. Though it has since been remedied, my brother is 3 years younger than me. We initially went to the same high school. I caught my brother and his friends bullying a smaller nerdy kid. I was a bit of a white knight in school. I grabbed the smaller nerdy kid's stuff and apologized to him and sent him on his way. I yelled at my brother's friends, grabbed my brother, pinned him against a set of lockers, and began yelling at him, slamming his back against the lockers. I was never so mad at my brother before. Seeing him being a bully made me see red. Throughout life I was a bigger kid and would always befriend the smaller kids who would usually get picked on. I don't know why. They were just generally always good people who enjoyed the same stuff I did. Like in elementary school, I got a citizenship award the same day I got detention for fighting because I got in a fight with a guy who was picking on my friend. My parents ended up moving my brother out of that high school because they knew he was becoming an asshole like all of his friends at the school. 4 years later, he thanks my parents for moving him out of there, as half of those friends are either in jail or just complete losers. When I was younger, my cousins on my dad's side always lived a few thousand miles away from us. We only saw them once or twice a year, but it was something that I really dreaded. My guy cousin, who is about a year younger than me, would just be a complete asshole to everyone around him. He would just keep on picking on my younger brother until he was in tears. Somehow, he managed to convince his parents that he was a good kid, and they made his sister stand up for him when I would call him on it. I was more mature than my age, so I thought that he would outgrow it in a few years or so, and that it was just adolescent behavior. He even convinced his parents that he was sick for an entire year. The doctors at the Mayo Clinic couldn't find anything wrong with him, but for some reason they still believed him. A few months ago we had a cousin reunion thing. When we were out to dinner with him, he made the announcement that he was gay. I immediately wrote of all his other behavior as him just trying to come to terms with himself. This was not correct. For the rest of the weekend, he became even a bigger asshole. Though that we had to treat him differently because he was gay. He didn't have to gather firewood because he was gay. It just went on and on and on. He would have emotional breakdowns and get his dad to do almost anything to make him happy. I have no issues with gay people, but when you use that as an excuse to act a certain way, I have lost all respect for you. Okay, not my child, but a child I helped raise. Took him through parts of his life and he lived with me. After graduating from high school, I realized that despite my best efforts, he was a total asshole. When I found out he stole about $7,000 from his grandmother who was dying, broke my heart. Felt like he stabbed me. It hurt so much. 2 months after kicking him out of the house, my mom died. He never made it up to her, and still to this day, has never apologized for his actions. I haven't talked to him for more than a year. He has a daughter who I have never met. He kind of acts like he doesn't even know who I am. After 2 years of trying to get close to him, I have given up. He's a jerk, he's an asshole, and doesn't deserve my love, and I have basically washed my hands of him. If he wants to have me in his life, he needs to break down and make it happen. Otherwise, life is too short to be hurt by him anymore. I remember the cute little boy he was, and I think of who he turned out to be, and I feel nothing but regret that I did not somehow do more for him. I still love him, I still miss him, but I doubt if I will ever see him again. Not a parent, but a caretaker. There's 3 kids, and they're all on the edge of what's acceptable emo, but the youngest in particular, you can't sit down at the dinner table with him without having him spit on your food, hit his mom, or just all in all, throw a major fit. I have caught with a knife threatening his older sister, and yes, he constantly threatens people that he will hurt them, to put it mildly. His parents, his mom especially, excuses all of this with lame excuses, like FX. The other parents say that they have similar problems. Just to name one point, I'm just scraping the surface with him. He's 8 years old. His parents works a lot but not that much, leave a date. Usually home at 16.30. I'm 90% sure he has some sort of attachment disorder, but there's no way I could ever say that to his parents, because yeah, you know, you just don't say stuff like that about other people's kids. Plus whenever we get into conversations about his behavior, the excuses comes pouring in. Even their dog effing hates him. Worst part, by the way, he wets his pants daily, no exceptions. Doctors can't say why. He even sheets his pants once a week and turns around and call me an idiot as I'm cleaning his clothes. He's amazing. My daughter, 13, is a manipulative bitch and no one seems to see it but me. It greatly saddens me to say this, especially in such stark terms, but that is how I see it. She absolutely terrorizes the house and makes her mother and brother walk on eggshells. My future ex-wife is too weak to stand up to my daughter and eventually gives in to everything she wants. Getting her way feeds my daughter's ego, and she thinks that she is a god among ordinary people. I'm the only one that stands up to her, and she hates that, so I've been effectively banished from her life. She won't talk to me. She won't go anywhere with me. The worst is the not talking. She has done that for 9 months now. It is like talking to a wall. Completely frustrating. I'm genuinely concerned for my daughter. I know a girl that was manipulative and the end result has not been good. She is lost in midlife and has few real friends and her family doesn't really trust her. Everything continues to be about this person and she really doesn't see anything wrong with her life. No one wants to be around someone who is manipulative. Quality people find ways to avoid people like this, and all a manipulative person is left with is low quality friends, boyfriends and a family that loves the person because of blood ties but hates their actions and attitude. Certainly I bear some responsibility for ending my relationship with her mother and moving out when she was a preteen. I tried to stay for the sake of the kids, but eventually staying in a relationship that has been broken wore me down. The separation was messy, and I'm sure that my daughter knows way too much. Future ex-wife's fault. I've asked for my daughter to go to counseling, but the future ex-wife allowed her to stop because she thought she is less of a bully around the house and wanted to reward her. There was a couple of other things that were withdrawn because of her behavior, but given back by the future ex-wife despite her horrendous behavior towards me. I've been in regular counseling for a couple of years and my therapist says that this behavior is definitely not normal. The overall feedback from people is to keep trying to reach her and that eventually she will realize that her dad has cared about her for all this time and that I never gave up on her, even though she was a huge bitch to me. I'm trying, but I'm at the limits of my patience and my heart is starting to close to her for treating me like shit for so long. At this point she is looking for me to apologize. I think for calling her a manipulative person. I just think it is a ploy to have me come groveling back to her. While I regret that our relationship has taken such a bad turn, I don't feel the least bit sorry for pointing out her manipulative ways so that she becomes self-aware and change. Sometimes I think I'm the only one who loves her enough to battle with her so that her future isn't one of manipulative bitch. TLDR. Daughter is a manipulative bitch that hasn't talked to me for 9 months. I'm the only one calling her out and I suffer for it.